Get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's AppraisalBuzz webinar, sponsored by McKissock. 2023 Housing Outlook, the economic indicators all appraisers should monitor. We have a really interactive webinar here for you, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. We have Jared Preisler, Chief Appraiser from DataMaster, Kevin Hecht, a certified residential real estate appraiser from Missouri, and Ryan Lundquist, a certified residential appraiser in the Sacramento, California area. They've got a wealth of knowledge. I'm going to hand it over to Kevin, who's going to get us started. Kevin, take it away.
All right. Thank you and welcome, everybody. And just to give a little bit more background about myself, again, my name is Kevin Hecht. I'm located in St. Louis, Missouri. In addition to being a certified residential appraiser, and I've been an appraiser since 1987, so been in the business for quite some time. I'm also an adjunct professor of economics at Maryville University and Southern New Hampshire University. And I really have a passion for the subject of economics, and I'd like to kind of bring that into the appraisal profession. And so one of the things that I, as we start, is give an overview of the general economy. One of the things I think we recognize from being appraisers is that one of the things we always run into when we talk to homeowners, when we talk to agents, when we talk to borrowers, is that they're always quoting what they hear on the national news. So for instance, we hear prices are up 24%, for example. The first thing that borrower thinks is that your appraisal is going to come in 24% higher than the appraisal the last time they had it done. And we know that real estate is local. And so what do we look at from a national perspective? How can we use that information in our appraisals? And then I think Jared and Ryan are going to kind of break that down on a more local level. But one of the things that I wanted to start with was there's a lot of things going on in the economy, a lot of different moving parts. And if I can do this, what's your biggest concern about the economy? Is it interest rates? Is it inflation? Is it housing supply? Is it foreclosures? I should have put an other in there as well. But of those four, what's your biggest concern? What are the things that you're concerned about in your market as it relates to the economy right now? Give everybody just a couple minutes to answer the poll, and we'll share the results with you as soon as we get responses. Again, we have a lot of people on the call, so we want to give everybody ample time to get their answers in. So I see the answers are coming in, and Jim, whenever you're all right, a couple more seconds, and then we're going to close the poll and we'll talk about what we're seeing. All right, so the poll disappeared for me.
It's now under the closed tab, Kevin.
Oh, all right. All right. So interest rates kind of dominated the concern. 52% of the people thought interest rates are their biggest concern. 32% said inflation. 13% had housing supply, and 2% said foreclosures. So each of those things is something we talk about or we hear about on the national news on a regular basis, and something we need to be aware of. We're going to start talking about with our presentation about, oops, sorry, should have started with that poll, about inflation. And the reason I start with inflation is because there was some inflation news that came out today, right? Inflation isn't something that we've dealt with on a regular basis for quite some time, but you can't turn on the news today without hearing about inflation. Now, the good news is that we're starting to see some relief from inflation. If you look at the chart in November of 2022, we see prices increase 7.1% compared to November 2021. And that's according to the 12-month percentage change in the consumer price index. Now, it was announced today that for December 2022, inflation has dropped to 6.5%. That makes the sixth consecutive month of decline. We're coming off the high of 9.1% in June of 2022. And while that rate is still high, it certainly starts to show a shift away from those strong monthly price increases that we were seeing. Overall, the expectation is that this slowing economy is going to bring inflation down to about 3.2% by the end of 2023. Those are the estimates. The St. Louis Fed President, James Bullard, just gave a talk recently, and it was titled his point was that 2023 could be a year of disinflation. He believes, and a lot of the Fed governors are on the same page now that we've seen the decline in inflation, that the rise in interest rates is starting to slow the economy. Now, I think the jury might still be out on that a little bit, but I think that it's an important direction so that we can figure out what might happen with interest rates as we move forward. Once we get inflation under control and the Fed can stop raising rates, we'll start to see interest rates come down. One of the interesting things is the discussion is at the next Fed meeting, will the rate increase be 0.5 point, or will they look to lower that to 1/4 point because they believe that their previous rate increases are starting to have an effect? That has a direct impact on the direction of the housing market. Oops, I'm trying to get the slide to change. There we go. So if we look at interest rates, and I threw this slide in there simply because as I was doing some research on another project, this kind of jumped out at me. For those of you that have been in the business for a long time, you might remember the interest rate peaks we saw in the early 80s. 18.44% was the peak interest rate. I certainly don't think that rates are going to get anywhere near 18.4% in this cycle, but I do think this chart offers us some perspective. So if we look at where we are now in a little more detail, we can see that rates kind of bottomed around December 2020, 2.67. And again, these are average rates. So there could be instances where you saw lower rates, where you saw generally higher rates. That gray shaded column is a defined recession. So that's 2 quarters of GDP, of declining GDP. But since December of 2020, interest rates have been on a fairly steep upward trajectory. Now, there's been some pullbacks, and we can see rates have come down from their recent highs. But the question is, what's next for interest rates? So if we look, oops, one too many there. If we look at some of the projections, this chart reflects the expectations of some of the bigger players in the real estate industry. I don't think it's any big surprise that the National Association of Realtors and the Mortgage Bankers Association are the more optimistic when it comes to forecasting rates in the first quarter. Fannie, Freddie, the National Association of Home Builders, and Wells Fargo are a bit more pessimistic, but the average estimate is pretty close to where we are now. As appraisers, we know that most buyers and sellers pay a lot of attention to rates, and rates and values are typically inversely related. And I say typically because many areas of the country are still experiencing really high demand, and at least in some cases, that acts as a buffer for some of the typical interest rate reactions we could expect or would expect. And I have another poll here because I'm kind of curious what everyone thinks is going to happen to interest rates. So will they go way up? Will they just go up a little bit? Or are they going to stay pretty much the same as to where they are today? So we'll use that 6.42 as our base. Will they go down or will they go way down? And so we'll give everybody a couple minutes or a couple seconds to answer that poll. We're already off to kind of an interesting start. Couple more seconds. And again, I think this is an important, it is important for us to understand the direction of interest rates because of the impact that that has on our business. And if you listen or you go out to any of the social media groups, you know, there's a lot of people that are struggling with volume. And that's a direct reflection in a lot of situations, a lot of markets of the interest rates going up. Oops. All right. So it looks like we're kind of evenly split in thirds. About a third of the people say they're going to go up. About a third say they're going to stay the same. And about a third of people say that they're going to go down. So I think, you know, generally speaking, based on the estimates that we hear about, we're going to see rates kind of bounce around a little bit, but within a fairly narrow range as we move forward. Supply is also one of those issues that we're very concerned about, right? And this chart kind of gives us a look at existing home sales. Now, this comes from the National Association of Realtors, and according to their information, sales were down 16% overall in 2022. Now, again, remember, that is a national number. A lot of markets saw different activity. If we break that down a little bit farther, you can see that we've seen a pretty steep decline in the last several months as we go through 2022. And again, I can't stress this enough as I go through my part of the presentation. We all know, again, that markets are local. So it's really important that you recognize and understand what's happening in your market. The national trends give us some background, but we know that each market is different. The median home price is kind of trended up, and the expectation is, and you see, again, one of the challenges we have with economic data is the lag time between when something actually happens and we have enough data to report it. So from Q2 of 2022 through the second quarter of 2023, those are all estimates. But you can see that in general, the estimate is as we move farther into 2023, the median home price is going to go up a little bit. Now, again, we don't expect to see those dramatic changes that we saw in a lot of markets leading through the pandemic, but we do still see a strong price market. Another concern is foreclosures. What's happening with foreclosures? And this data comes from CoreLogic, just came out in the last couple of days. In 2021, the share of housing units with foreclosure filing was 0.1%. The foreclosure rate reached its peak in 2010, right after the financial crisis, obviously. But since then, that rate has steadily fallen. Again, we see in general, overall, homeowners in distress, the amount of homeowners in distress has generally gone down, and that's a positive sign overall for the market. I think the general consensus is that with strong demand, with the current levels of equity, and the willingness of financial institutions to look at this problem ahead of any collapse or any big issues, is going to make this process much easier, much more amenable than it was when we went through the financial crisis. There are going to be foreclosures, right? There always are. But people's fears about a repeat of 2008, I think, are overblown because the underlying factors in the markets just don't point to that kind of a reaction. So are we headed for a recession? There are three headlines that I posted here that attempt to answer that question, because I always find it interesting when we look at what people are saying. So the first one is from Bankrate in an article published just a couple days ago. The U.S. economy has a 64% chance of entering a recession this year. Bloomberg did one towards the end of last year that said economists place a 70% chance for U.S. recession. But there's also an article that says, defying the odds, jobs, inflation news spark hope that U.S. may skirt a 23 recession. So the question is, what do you think is going to happen? And this is another poll, if I can get it to...
Kevin, I just I pushed it live early. I thought you
got
were
it. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So I'm curious what everybody thinks, because again, there's a lot of talk about a recession and what's going to happen as we move forward. And I think one of the things we have to be aware of and to recognize is there are different levels of severity to recessions, right? People that can remember back in the 70s and then through some of the 90s, we saw different levels of recession in those periods. All right. So it looks like most people think that we're going to have a recession, but it's going to be very mild. And I would tend to agree with that. I think the numbers support that as well. Just a couple of things to kind of bring it back to specific information about the housing market. And again, this is a national view. This information, again, comes from CoreLogic, just came out January 3rd, so it's fairly recent. And their survey or their study shows that home prices nationwide, and this includes distressed sales, increased year over year by 8.6% in November 2022 versus November 2021. And again, I think one of the things to recognize is that that's what people hear on the news. That's their expectation when you go out to, that's their minimum expectation when you go out to do an appraisal. So understanding this information, recognizing where it comes from, can help us as we have those discussions with our homeowners and clients and borrowers. The expectation going forward is for an increase, but a smaller increase. So CoreLogic, and again, this comes from CoreLogic, is anticipating a 2.8% increase year over year from 2022 to 2023 in housing values. Now we can break that down a little bit farther by state. So if you look at the map, first of all, no states posted an annual decline in home prices in 2022. The states with the highest increases year over year were Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia. But this map kind of gives you helps you understand what happened in each of the states, broken down by percentage change. So just to kind of wrap up the national part, the overview of this, a couple things to watch. First of all, the inflation news came out today. So again, positive inflation news. That's a positive sign for the next Fed meeting, which is at the end of the month, where they'll decide by how much they're going to raise or try to raise interest rates. And that's, again, another important indicator of what they think the state of the economy is. The higher the rate increase, the more concerned they are about the overall economy. The National Association of Realtors comes out with their existing home sales for December. They'll post that on January 20th, 2023. And the Consumer Price Index, the next indication of inflation, comes out today, or came out today, as I said. So one of the things that we talk about in economics, or most people think about economics, is how boring it is, how tedious it is. So I want to end with a little bit of humor, or try to. Hopefully this comes off. But how many people know what that little pocket in your jeans is for? I know a lot of people think they know what it's for, but it's actually for your after-tax income. That's your paycheck after taxes. All right, I tried. I don't know how well that went over, but I just want you to know economists do have a sense of humor. All right, and I think now I am turning it over to Ryan to pick up.
Thank you so much. And it's really good to be here today. I wish I could see you in person. I'm going to go ahead and start up a poll and ask you, which box are you checking in your appraisal reports lately? Declining, stable, increasing? Would love to hear. But what I'm going to do briefly, I have 15 minutes. I'm going to talk about what's been going on in the Sacramento market. We sort of made the hot list for a lot of years, and now we're making the not list. We're often coupled with markets like Boise and Phoenix and Austin. And you might recognize some of the trends in your area, but then I want to talk about how am I speaking about the market in actual appraisal reports. And so what do we see here with the poll? I think I'll close that. We got everything there, hopefully. Okay, so we have a lot stable, and about 25% declining, some increasing, and that just shows that the market is not doing the same thing across the country. Okay, my market might be more extreme, but then again, maybe it's something to watch that will hit your market soon. But let me kind of walk through where we're at. I will say the Fed sort of snuck up on the housing market like Jason Momoa sneaking up on Superman here, and it fundamentally changed the market. I think this is the perfect meme to sort of describe how the trend has felt. All right. But in Sacramento, you can see the median price at the beginning of the pandemic was $440,000. And then in about 2 years, it went up almost $200,000, which is astounding because we previously had 9 years of growth before, and the market was legitimately slowing down. And then all of a sudden, it speeds up in a major way. But notably, do you see what's been happening over the past 2 quarters, really over 8 months? We've seen half the gains during the pandemic wiped away. And so, in a very short period of time, we've seen a rapid decline. And I'll sort of unpack that. When you look at okay, when you look at year over year stats, we're about 4 to 5% lower than last year at the same time. Now, sometimes when I'm talking with real estate agents or loan officers, they gravitate towards these stats and they're like, "Hey, the market is in a bit of a goalie," to sort of borrow a line from The Big Short, and no big deal. But I think when we back up and we see stats from May, check out what we're seeing: a much different story where median price, average price per square foot, they're hovering somewhere around 15% down since that time. Okay, now no metric is perfect. I know that. We could argue about that later in the comments, but the thing is that we've seen growth about 3 to 4 times faster a rate of decline than a normal seasonal trend. And so it's been really, really quick. And my sense is that one of the things we have to be careful right now with data is focusing on year over year with, well, what's happened over the past couple of quarters. So really important. But here's a different way to look at it. The top line is the median price in 2022. And what you can see is that, the top line, and then 2021 in orange, there was this huge gap at the very beginning of the year. Then the market shifted, mortgage rates came, Jason Momoa snuck up on Superman, and we saw this very sharp downtrend. Right now, on the right side of the screen, you could see we're really only about 5% different from last year, but can you see how far we had to come in order to get to 5%? And so I think that's really the big story that we're watching in housing data right now. And really, we're in this place where buyers are looking and going, "You're in my world now." We are in a buyer's market where buyers are able to control the shots. But I always remind buyers that it's not 2007 vibes where you're going to say, "I'll take a 30% discount from market value." That's not it at all. There's still multiple offers, but it's nothing like what it was in the beginning of 2021. So, but here's, I think, where we're seeing a bigger effect. I think in real estate, we often focus in the real estate community on prices. I think the real issue is volume. What's happening with volume? And when you look at Sacramento County, here's 2022 at the very top, and you could see annual volume every year from 2001. What do you notice here? Sacramento this year had the worst volume since 2007. This was a really low year. But when we look at it from an annual perspective, volume was down about 10% from the pre-pandemic average. You might think, no big deal. That's not that much. But let me show you what's been happening lately, because like I said before, we can hide behind annual stats if we're not careful. All right. Do you see November? This was the worst November we've seen in recent history, as far as since MLS went digital anyway. Okay. And look at December. It was the worst December in over 2 decades. And so when I look at November and December stats, volume is down closer to 40 to 45%. Instead of that annual stat, we're down 20%. I think the real trend is that we're missing 40% of buyers right now. So that's one reason why we've seen such a reaction to prices. The pool of buyers is simply smaller right now, right? And so again, sellers are in a place where, buyers saying the price is wrong. I want a discount, right? Any Happy Gilmore fans? Sorry, I know I'm in 7th grade. So, but I really agree with Rick Palacios Jr. He's a housing analyst, works for John Burns Real Estate Consulting. This was a tweet from September where he says, "Seems like housing industry is waking up to the harsh reality that home prices can fall even if supply doesn't rise." And I think in a lot of cases, and even this week, I've heard people say, "Hey, we're all good because supply is low," right? But then I think mortgage rates are saying, "Hold my beer." And we're seeing a different dynamic. And so even though supply is low, we're seeing declining prices. Look, here's my market from 2009 onward. And you can see right now at the very right side of the graph that we're really at about 2 months supply. We do not have an oversupply. On paper, this looks completely normal, but I would say the trend has been really sharp. Okay, the rate of price decline has been more like 2007 in terms of the sharpness. Okay, we should be seeing that because rates changed so sharply. I would be shocked if we weren't seeing what we're seeing right now. But really, on paper, if I only looked at this stat, I would be like, yeah, the market's kind of normal, right? Same thing with days on market. Here's a cool way to look at the market, and then I want to transition, talk about what to expect this spring. So this is January through December on the x-axis, and you can see the red line represents an average, a 4-year average before the pandemic, before things got crazy. And in the beginning of the year, it takes about 40, 44 days to sell. The market heats up, it takes less time to sell. And then, like clockwork, around July, it takes more time to sell. Okay. And your market, maybe it's similar, maybe it's different, but let me show you 2022 on there. We started the year, the black line, we were so far below the normal trend where it was literally taking half the time to sell that it should have been taking, right? It's sort of like when we're doing an appraisal and it's on the market for 7 days and you're like, well, what's wrong with the house, right? It felt like that, but you could see a really, really sharp change where all of a sudden the mortgage rates changed sharply and then days on market changed, right? But when you look at days on market, I think it looks pretty normal. Yesterday on Twitter, someone was looking at one of my graphs. They're like, days on market looks really healthy. And I would say, I actually agree. Okay. But this reminds us we can't pin the trend on just one metric. If I look at the months of supply and days on market, there's nothing to write home over. But if I look at price deceleration and what's happening with volume, 40% missing, that's where we really see the market. And so that's why I'm just a fan of, we've got to look at a lot of stats to really understand the market trend. Got to be careful of sugarcoating, got to be careful of embracing a doom narrative. I think either narrative is a bad situation. So what will the future look like? What can we expect ahead? I'd say this. What happens with mortgage rates by the week can change the temperature of the market, right? So if rates do go down like Barry Habib predicts, or some other people are predicting, that can add more demand back into the market. All right. But I remind people, especially loan officers lately, I found that a lot of loan officers seem to be really high on housing hope. They're smoking the hopium, and people are so ready for the market to rebound and going, if rates dip, then we'll get the buyers back. And I just remind people that we're missing 40% of buyers locally. Modest rate declines aren't going to all of a sudden bring back so much of the market that's missing. And so it's going to be a process to get volume back. All right. Here's mortgage applications nationally. And I have a link below if you get the document. I suggest bookmarking this and watching it, because here's the prophecy into the future. Because fewer mortgage applications leads to fewer pending contracts, and that leads to fewer closed sales. And so if we're to see volume rebound, we will see it as a leading indicator with what's going on with mortgage applications. All right. So what do I expect in the spring? This is pretty cool, I think. There's some things that I've seen in my market. I hope this is helpful for you. Now, during a declining trend, this is 2005 to 2008. I just want to show you what happens to prices and what happens to volume typically. The dark bars here are the median price from January to June each year. Okay, so here's the peak of the market, and you can see towards the left side. And when you look at 2006, the blue bars, there was a modest uptick in prices, even though the market was declining, volume was falling off a cliff. Look at 2007, one of our worst years ever in the region. And still, there was a slight uptick in the median price and then a downtrend. 2008, the last set of dark bars, you can see that, went a little bit flat and then down. And so it's a good reminder that, even though prices are declining, there's more attention on the market during the spring. And if I show you the 1990s in Sacramento, it's really hit and miss. Some years outright declined, some years looked a little flat. There was a little bit of a bump in 1994. And so what I've been telling people ahead is that, look, there's more attention on the spring market typically during a declining year. And I'll show you volume in just a sec, but it's kind of hit and miss with the trend. And so, we'll see what happens. And what we get to do as appraisers is gauge that in our local market. Now, here's the big thing, volume. Okay, and what you can see is that volume disappeared in Sacramento for a couple years, all right, really between 2006 and 2007. Now, today, I realize that the market is way different than those years, but you know what? Similar volume is missing. We are in a valley right now where we're missing volume. And so what happened during the spring seasons, during the worst years on record? Okay, here's the worst years on record. The dark bars are January through June each year. And you can see the second set in 2006, the third set in 2007, and 2008. Like, prices were definitively going down. Volume was missing. Look at all that missing volume. But still, do you see the uptick in volume? Even though prices overall were declining, there were more sales happening during the spring. Now, volume was way down from the normal trend, but I think this is where we want to keep our eye on the market. And I think one of the things that we have to interpret is the market still declining, or is there some seasonality happening? We're going to have to sort of flirt with, which is which ahead. But that's just what I'm fully expecting in my market, to see higher sales in November and December eventually. I would be shocked if we didn't see this dynamic. Okay, so let me transition to the last part. I want to show you a couple trend graphs and then talk about, well, how am I talking about this market in appraisal reports? All right, so here's a graph, just a random graph of a zip code in Roseville, California. And look, there's a clear downtrend. All my lines are pointing down lately. I make this graph in numeric, could use Excel, whatever, it doesn't matter. But here's one graph that came across my desk. I just finished an appraisal. I think it was 2 days ago. And you can see the trend line at the right side of the graph that, it's definitely going down. And then there's the boxes I checked. I said the market was declining. I actually said that supply was balanced and properties are selling for under 30 or under 90 days. And so let me sort of show you real quick. Here's a CMA that I pulled. There's not that much data in this neighborhood, but I kind of highlighted some stuff that I'm looking at, and I take this data and I put it in a market statement. Okay, what I don't want to do in a market with uncertainty, or any market, is just to have my boilerplate that, in every single appraisal. That's just not going to build credibility. And so I'm looking at the number of sales. I'm looking at, how long it's taking to sell. I'm looking at the difference between the original price and then the final close price. And then I bring it all together. Now, there's no one way to describe the market. Here's a statement that I put in my report. I could have made this a few sentences, but here's my college try at describing what's going on and giving my reader a sense of, this guy hopefully knows what he's talking about. I said, on the dated value, the market is best described as having declining prices after an explosive past couple of years of price growth and heightened buyer activity. Mortgage rates changed sharply over the past 8 months, which ended up having a dramatic effect on affordability and buyer demand. Trend graphs help show a declining trend, and it's been common to see pendings over time get into contract at lower levels compared with recent sales. Sacramento County, since May, we've seen the median price dip by 15%, which is about 3 times faster than the normal seasonal change for the time of year. Sales volume has been hovering about 40% lower than the normal trend too, which speaks to waning buyer demand. Now, I have this statement. I can adapt it as needed. I can cut and paste it in other reports, but here's where I import the stuff from my CMA. I said, over the past 90 days, there were 6 sales in Cavala Ranch, and they sold at about 94 to 96% of the original list price in an average of 30 to 60 days for the most part. On average, properties sold about $35,000 to $50,000 below the original asking price, but not every listing goes below the list price, right? There are currently 7 active listings and 1 pending. This is technically considered a balanced market, as a balanced market typically has a 1-to-1 ratio of sales to listings. However, despite being technically balanced on paper, prices have been declining. The bigger force in today's market has been a dramatic change in affordability due to rate increases, so prices have declined despite a technically normal housing supply. Trend graphs in this report help support the price trend as explained above. Okay, so either you'll think, hey, that's really cool, or maybe you despise it. I'm okay with anything, but what I want to do is to sort of see the trend in the market and then capture that on paper. And if I get the value wrong, that's one thing, but you know what I will nail? I will nail the market. I want the reader to understand, here's what's going on, and I want to pull out stats in the neighborhood. This is me. This is my contact information. Thanks everyone for letting me do this, and I'll pass the torch now. And thank you so much.
Hey, Ryan, thank you very much. My name is Jared Preisler, and I am excited to be here today. I don't know why everyone keeps dropping off. I'm the only target now on your screen. I hope that's not a bad sign. I'm going to move forward a little bit. I really love what Kevin and Ryan talked about, and you'll notice that we're kind of moving here. We started with the national overview. Ryan got into some real specifics, and I really enjoyed his commentary as well. What I want to do is back up for just a second and talk about market analysis. There's from the appraisal of real estate, there's chapter 15 is all about market analysis. I believe the most current version is the 15th edition right now. And I want to get us all on the same page for a minute with the 6 steps of market analysis. Many of these steps you do intuitively as you're looking at your property. And I 100% agree with Kevin and Ryan about the communication of your results in your report. So I'm going to have some examples similar to what Ryan showed you of some ways that you can describe your market and what's happening. I believe wholeheartedly that the market analysis functionality is where we as appraisers will be able to have our value going forward. Delineating a market and being able to communicate what we did and how that influences our client or relates to our client is very important. Most of our clients, they're asking us to do an appraisal because there may be some risk that they're trying to evaluate, and they can't get it from a national survey or a national study. They can't get it from something regional. They want something very specific. There's a lot of tools out there that provide automated values, that suggested comparables, that maybe a Z estimate, some of those kind of tools, but they don't replace you as the expert in the market. I looked at what Ryan was doing. Those are the graphs I saw for the first time as he was presenting. That's very different than what my market looks like. And that's where we add value. So if it's been a little while since you've had a course on market analysis, and you're a little bit slower right now, I suggest that you get with McKissock and you find one of their courses on market analysis and fine tune your skill set. Get to where you're comfortable with those graphs and describing them. But here's a couple of things. First, the first step in the market analysis is called property productivity analysis. And what that simply means is analyzing competitive characteristics of the subject property. Very, very similar to step 1 of the valuation process, where we're identifying relevant characteristics. You're going to do the same thing. What is it about that property what is it about your subject property that competes or is valuable, relevant in your existing market? I remember back in 2007, 2008, and 2009, there were aspects of the market that diverged, where we had in my place where I work, we had some markets that were still increasing while others had declined, and there was a disconnect in different products. I'm starting to see that now in my market. The patio home market is very strong. We have a lot of baby boomers that are transitioning and love the patio home product. They have cash that's available. They're upgrading, the quality of those, and it's reacting very differently to our townhomes, our existing older home markets. And so step one, figure out exactly what the relevant characteristics or the competitive characteristics of the property. Step number two is identifying, or is market delineation. So now you're going to identify the demand sources and the competing area or the competitive area. This is where you're going to identify your market boundaries, your market area boundaries, or your neighborhood boundaries. There's a lot of different terms that you can use, but really you're showing where this property competes within. And I'm going to show you an example of kind of what that looks like as well. And then step number three is the demand analysis. Now, there have been a lot of questions coming in, and I've been looking at some of those, and all of you are asking very, very good questions that kind of relate to this demand. This is an estimate of the current demand and the predicted future demand. We saw on several of Ryan's graphs the demand being represented. We look at the housing supply. We estimate how many, we're looking at the unemployment rates. Those could tell us a little bit about demand. If there's new companies that are moving into your area, there's a job expansion, or maybe jobs are moving from your market to another market. That's all going to be on the demand side. There's 6 steps. And before I get to the other 3, I want to throw a poll up here. I've been interested in knowing how much time are you spending in your current assignments on your market analysis, on the market analysis portion of the appraisal process. So if you'll take just a second and look at that, answer the poll, and is it occupying more time than what you have in the past? Is it easier right now to analyze the market, or is it harder to analyze the market? Are you spending less than 10%, 10 to 20%, 20 to 30, or more than 30% of your assignments right now analyzing your market or doing your market analysis? I'll give it just a second here as you look at this poll, as you respond to it. For me personally, I think that I'm spending more time right now in my assignments. It used to be as the market was increasing and rates were really low, the job market was good, although transitioning from office to work at home, it seemed to be that there was a little less time spent doing my analysis. So I'll go ahead and close the poll out here. It looks like we have about under 15% are spending less than 10% of their time in the appraisal process. The bulk of us are spending between 10 and 20%. That's 45% of us. There's about 27% that are spending between 20 and 30% of the appraisal process on market analysis. And more than 30% is, again, about 14%. I think that this really shows the value of the appraiser right now. If you're spending that time, your client is really, that's what they're asking you for, that they are very unsure of the market. Later on, towards the end, there's going to be a couple of handouts that we're going to provide for you. And one of those is a handout that I put together. It's the 39 most frequently asked questions when I'm out presenting. I know that Kevin does a lot of presenting, Ryan does a lot of presenting, and I'm out quite often presenting to both brokers and loan officers, mortgage officers, and I get asked a lot of questions. A big source of the work that I'm doing right now is non-lender work. It's coming from real estate agents that are not really sure where to price properties. They're not sure how much demand there is for a particular product. And if you're out in the market, if you're out in your in your area and you're presenting, these questions can help you. The handout will be able to help you kind of identify and prepare for some of those questions that you may get as you're out presenting. Moving on to, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but step number 4 is the supply analysis. Now, this is where we're looking at the number of active and under contract listings versus as it relates to the amount of sales, the number of sales in the previous period of time. And we do that on a regular basis, should be done with every one of our market analysis. Number 5 is the residual demand analysis. Number 5 and number 6 are when you're doing more of a level C and D market analysis, or even a marketability analysis. But we analyze the interaction between that supply and demand. And this, on step number 5, is kind of the conclusion of what most of us would do in a normal residential assignment. I think Ryan's example, his commentary where he anchored back his statements. This is an increase over the past 8 months. This is what it was doing 12 months ago. This is what supply and demand looks like in a normal cycle. That's step number 5. Step number 6 is doing some forecasting, the subject capture analysis. And this is where we're saying we're predicting performance and what's going to happen in the future. So with that basis, I think one of the areas where we can maybe all improve on, especially as we have a little bit more time, is in describing the market. And I hope that you can read this. I hope that this is easy to read. The color maybe didn't turn out exactly the way that it was on my screen. I apologize for that. But this might be something that you would say in your market description. The market search includes homes within the described neighborhood or market boundaries found on page 1, the neighborhood section, with the following range. The range of year built, 2000 to 2022, style included ramblers with a total square footage range of 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. The lot size ranges between quarter and half acre. The results was 48 listings in the past 12 months. It's important to put in there, not just say 48 listings, but over what time period? Is that over 3 years? Is that over 6 months? What is that related to? 25 of those are sold, 7 are actives, only 1 is under contract, and the balance were off market, canceled, or never reported as sold. That really gives your reader kind of an understanding of where you put the subject property in the market. And of course, all of these numbers would be relevant for whatever how you delineate or describe the market and the competing characteristics. It might not be appropriate to do a half acre or a quarter acre range in your market, but let's tell our readers what it is that we're doing, and then tell them the why and the what and the how. We want to connect it. And maybe you had to do something that was a little unusual because you didn't have enough data. Maybe things have slowed down a little bit in the market. Here's an example of something. And by the way, I should mention, we plan on providing this slide deck to you at the end as well, so that you can use some of these examples, or you can look at them in greater detail. But here's an example of something where I didn't have a lot of data that was super current, was just like the subject. So I had to go back in time a little bit and how that related. Just real quick, it says it was necessary to expand the date of sales search beyond 2 to 3 months from the contract date to find the most comparable sales in the area. Limited to disclosed sales like the subject are noted in the area from October through January. This market has experienced an overall steady increase in value in the past 12 to 18 months, with a slowing or stabilizing in the past 6 to 8 weeks. No time adjustment was necessary for comps in the last 90 days. Older sales, comps 2 and 4, were adjusted to reflect the market change. Something in a simple statement like that. And then the next part is that we're going to show them or give them the support for those conclusions. And I've got a slide coming up here in a minute that will show those. Here are some of the key indicators that we've already talked about, some of them today. Here's some other things that you need to be aware of and be tracking in your market. It's not enough to just say the list to sale price ratio is this today. How does that compare? If you're trending, is that normal? Is 103% list to sale price ratio normal? I saw some questions about concessions, how those come into play. If sellers are now giving 2-3% concession, is that 97% list to sale price ratio really 97? Or is it something less than that? Instead of 97, is it 95%? Talk about that. But we should be looking at the number of active listings versus the number of solds, the absorption ratio, the months of supply, days on market are a great indicator. As those increase, what does that tell us about what's happening in the market? Maybe that there's 3 or 4 feet of snow on the ground and that it's just a normal winter selling season, or that the market is reacting adversely to the increase in interest rates. List to sale price ratio, of course, and then make sure to give some content. Are these improving, stable, or declining? Provide some support. There's some graphs and charts, sources. Where did you get your analysis from? What are those methods of analysis that you used? Tell your reader the why, what, and how. Here's some graphs that are great, but not alone. Make sure that you're describing what's in your graph. Here's some resources that I find useful for me. Your MLS, of course, one of the greatest resources that you have. One of the areas that I like to use in my market is our universities and our state economic office. We have and I would do some research and find out if this is available in your area. The University of Utah, I work in the Utah market, has an economic department that studies our economy in detail. They can tell you what the unemployment rate is in every single sector, workforce sector. They report those sometimes on a 2-week basis, at most on a monthly basis. So it's very, very current. They advise our governor's office, and those publications are available on the University of Utah economic site. That's something that you can see. One of the publications that I like to subscribe to is the Weekly Real Estate News. Gives me kind of an indication of what's going on. Black Knight, of course, CoreLogic. We've already seen some of those statistics. Another one is the FHFA Home Price Calculator, and I put the link in there for getting to it. If you haven't played around with that, it's very interesting. It can be property specific. You can take a look at that. It tends to be a little bit behind, more towards the end of a quarter, beginning of a quarter, but in the middle of the quarter, it's some really good information. Redfin data. Now this is a little bit different, the data center. You can get down into census block to zip code. You can go down, put in your property address, your city, and it can give you even a comparison between different markets. I use DataMaster. I like its flexibility, the ability that it has to compare multiple markets side by side. Sometimes I work in rural areas where I don't have enough data to really fill in the holes, and it gives me the ability to look at multiple markets in my conclusions. And so that's if you're using a software tool, please make sure that you understand how it works. Advisory Opinion 37, I think, is a great reminder of that for us. And not all tools work the same in all markets. And so make sure that you understand what's going on there. We do have a little giveaway here. There's a couple of them that you're going to see here. This first one is for Data Master. If you sign up today, it's free. There's a limited time offer. You can click on that. And then the last thing, I'll make that handout available on the questions that are most asked of me by lenders and brokers, and use that as a resource in preparing for your next presentation. Jim, I don't know if you were looking at some of the questions for us, or
yeah, I moved a bunch of the questions to the priority tab. If you guys want, Kevin, I see you've answered a few of them.
Yeah.
If you guys want to jump and check there, the priority tab, and see if there's one there that you want to take for the whole audience.
Can I start with just kind of a general, because a couple of the questions were around unemployment, and I didn't really go through unemployment in my presentation, and I should have. But I think one of the things we need to recognize, and again, I should probably emphasize, these are my opinions. They don't reflect Calibri, McKissock, or any of the academic institutions that I teach at. But I think, in my opinion, unemployment is something to be concerned about. And I say that because we keep hearing that unemployment is at historic lows, but we're also hearing about a bunch of layoffs that are happening across the economy. Now, some level of that unemployment is part of what's driving inflation down, and that was to be expected. But if these layoffs continue or increase, then that's going to have a negative impact, obviously, on the economy, and it's going to change the dynamic a little bit. I think in the labor market itself, we're already seeing some shifting of the dynamics from, people being able to go out and get a new job right away to there's now a lag. And I think some of the layoffs you're not seeing the same level of jobs out there for those people that are being laid off. So that is something I think that is very important to watch, because I think that's going to have, or could have, a very big impact as we move forward. But again, some of that is expected. It depends on, in my opinion, whether it keeps moving forward.
I think, Kevin, you're right on. I would also say it's important to look at where that unemployment is. Mm-hmm. In my market, for example, we're starting to see unemployment in the housing market. Housing starts are slowing down, construction, because of the demand. Well, if those participants in the market are primarily in that sector, and unemployment starts increasing, that could have an impact on the products, on a particular market product, on a specific subject type property. And so I think it's important to watch those, not just and say the U.S. annual unemployment is here, but what is it really in your area? There's a question here from Lisa about the 1004MC form. Lisa, great question. She says, are most appraisers still including that even if they're not required? I am seeing it included. A lot of my lenders, a lot of my clients still want to see it. I think appraisers are comfortable with the display, but what I am starting to see is a lot more explanation, because those 3 columns may not describe the story. And so the summary is becoming more detailed and saying, even though it says this, my graphs are showing this differently, and so I still see it in a lot of the reports that I'm reviewing.
Yeah. One other just kind of general response. A lot of questions about inflation, and one of the things that I think is, and again, my opinion, misleading, is when we take out food and energy from the inflation discussion, right? Most of the rates that we talk about are they take out food and energy because they're so volatile. But the fact of the matter is, you still have to pay for that, right? And that still affects how much disposable income you have left over. And so if we continue to see issues with gasoline, for example, or we see food prices continue to increase, I think that needs to be something that's factored into the conversation the Fed has about what they're going to do with rates. If you didn't hear, the U.S. drew down the strategic reserve to historically low levels and is now in the process of trying to resupply. And that pulls demand from other uses. We only have so many resources, and those resources have to be divided. And so I think we'll see how that has an impact on the economy, on gas prices, oil prices specifically, as we move forward. And I think throughout this presentation, because there were some specific questions about I'm not seeing this and I'm not seeing that, or I'm seeing this, that's exactly the point, right? Everything is local. You have to make sure that you focus on your market when you're doing this. There's an advantage to understanding the overview, the national level, but an appraisal is local. And that's kind of the idea behind some of the information that Ryan and Jared shared. And I think that's obviously critical to when we do appraisals.
Do you guys see any others you want to take before we close out?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead. You grab one.
I was going to say, Ken has a great question. He says, today, Housing Wire reports mortgage demand is picking up as seller concessions include concessions for loan rate buydowns rise. What are the best ways for appraisers to analyze, measure, and report the impacts of these factors in their appraisals? And look, I'm sure there's different ways to skin a cat. In ideal terms, we want to see concessions reported in MLS. That doesn't always happen, but I think that's where we just want to have conversations with agents and say, hey, was there any sort of credit, anything that the seller gave to the buyer to get the deal done? And I find that agents are often forthcoming, not always, obviously, but I think in simple terms, just to ask the question, did this credit, did the inclusion of this, whatever it is, did it affect the price? And comparing that to, what am I seeing in the comps? Are there homes with concessions that sold at inflated levels? And then I see other homes that sold much lower, maybe market values lower. And so I think that, we have to account for that, but there's no way to account for it unless we're, looking for that, I think, in MLS and having the conversations. I know in my market, close to half of all properties, right, half of sales in Sacramento County have concessions. I have a cool chart that I've been following, and there's been a really big uptick in concessions given over the past 8 months as the market softens. So I think that we're just going to see more of this, and we're just going to have to be in the thick of it going, hey, did this affect the price or not?
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. That was a lot of great information. I know everybody that joined us is really going to enjoy it. We did publish the handouts. Make sure to check the handout tab. If you want to take a CE course on this topic, McKissock has a course. I'm sending the pop-up for you now. It's a 3-hour live stream CE course for you, so you can take that as well. But we had such great information here from the team. I really appreciate you. Ryan, Kevin, and Jared, you guys did a great job, and we really appreciate it. And Julie, I know you did a lot of work on the back end organizing it all, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim, for putting it all together. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us as well, and have a great day.